You know, there's been mixed reaction to the Constitutional Court's decision to decriminalize the private use of marijuana this week. So what happens to the people who have previous convictions for cannabis possession? Let's get you some answers. I'm joined via Skype by University of the Western Cape researcher, Jean Redpath. Thank you so much for joining us, Jean. Let's talk first about what you've been crunching the numbers, right? And that's really your thing. How do the numbers of convictions for possession of drugs and marijuana stack up against the number of convictions for other crimes that are categorized as serious crimes?
Well, unfortunately, the data doesn't distinguish between marijuana convictions and other types of drugs. It also doesn't distinguish between possession only and other types of offences related to drugs, such as selling or cultivating. But what we do know is something in the region of 150,000 in the most recent financial year convictions, drug-related convictions, were handed down, and that amounts to around 49%. In other words, practically half of all the convictions that the National Prosecuting Authority was able to achieve in 2016-2017. So
practically half of those had to do with drug-related offences?
Nothing to do with drug. We don't know whether it's marijuana or other types of drugs. We don't know if it's selling, but certainly some of those would have been related to marijuana, and some of them would have been related to possession.
And you make an interesting point in your analysis of the data by saying that, if you look at it over a period of some 10, 20 years, the convictions for drug offences have gone up more than 500%, but general convictions for other crimes are not going up by that much, with a few exceptions.
Precisely. So around 20 years ago, there were only around 20,000 convictions, drug-related convictions, and now we're seeing in excess of 150,000. At the same time, the total number of convictions for all crimes has gone down. The only crime types which have shown an increase other than drugs are sexual offence convictions and aggravated robbery.
So what do we read into these figures then, Jean? Because we're not just looking at them for interest's sake. What do they tell us about the workload that has been wrought onto the criminal justice system by, drug-related offences, which rightfully so should be pursued, but now in this context of what this means now for possession of marijuana, for example, are we likely, I guess what I'm asking you, are we likely to see police and prosecutors having their hands freed up to pursue other more serious cases now that they will not be arresting people for, possession of a few grams of marijuana?
Unfortunately, part of the reason why there are so many of these convictions is because they're much easier to convict. If you think of a sexual offense case where you have complainants, you have evidence, you have forensic evidence, you have a whole lot of difficulties with witnesses. If you think of an aggravated robbery case, how difficult that is to secure conviction. Whereas in a possession case, in fact, many of those cases, the person simply pleads guilty. It's not very difficult to get the conviction. You don't have a citizen witness. It's usually just the police officer concerned. And so we're unlikely to see those convictions matched by other types of convictions. But what it will do is that particularly some court time and some time transporting prisoners, people being held on remand, it's likely to affect those kinds of things. Yes, it will free up some space and some resources to pursue more serious matters, but we certainly won't see the kinds of numbers that we've seen for drug convictions.
And there's a particular dynamic to that, Jean, isn't there? Because some of these law enforcement agencies actually have targets that say you must arrest so many people a month to show that you're doing your work. And the argument has gone until now that the easiest thing all along has been to simply bust a few guys for smoking marijuana.
Yeah, unfortunately, drug arrests are indeed a target for the SAPS, for the South African Police Service. And I think what this judgment is going to do very positively is require the whole system to rethink what it is that we want to prioritize. Yes, some drugs and some drug activity may be criminogenic in nature, may be affecting the level of violence in a community. But certainly the kinds of cases that the Constitutional Court has now said we shouldn't be pursuing, those are not criminogenic. They do not cause violence in our communities. So perhaps SAPS needs to start redirecting its whole philosophy. In a way, it has pursued drugs, saying that, oh, but if we get the druggies and the gangsters, we'll get the others. And I'm not sure that's true, because at the same time as we've seen this explosion in drug-related convictions, literally in excess of 500%, what we've seen at the same time is our murder rate has deteriorated. So it's clear that there isn't an association, at least between violent crime, which is best indicated by murder, and this pursuing of drug cases.
Yeah, in fact, interestingly, I saw a communication from within the police. I think it was in the Free State that basically was an order about how police officers should now approach this issue of possession of drugs, and basically instructing them that don't effect arrests where it's clear that this person is in possession for their own personal use and it's no more than 3 kilograms. That's where they are pegging it at the moment, pending the finalization of what the law changes are supposed to be. Jane, but talk to me about what this means. If I don't know if you've been able to work through in your head what it will mean that people will not be arrested for possession for personal use in their private spaces, but selling and buying remains criminal offenses and what they are calling dealing. Now, if police are easing up, they're taking the foot off the pedal in as far as possession is concerned, are we not then likely to have a situation where basically it becomes so complex for police to actually navigate this, and basically even the crimes we want to see being pursued, such as possession, such as dealing, also end up suffering, and we're not seeing the numbers that we would want to see on that front?
Well, it's up to Parliament to now write. Parliament can either just accept what the court has said and leave it at that. But I think what's more likely is Parliament has 24 months to, well, it doesn't have 24 months, it has as long as it likes to actually rewrite the legislation. And there's a real opportunity here for us to adopt a harm reduction approach rather than a criminal justice approach to drugs in general. We do have suggestions of it in our legislation of a harm reduction kind of approach, where you can send someone to a clinic rather than incarcerating them. But what we really need is a whole overhaul of the system to think, now, how should we really deal with the harm that is caused by drugs, and how can we do that? And there's a real opportunity here for Parliament to approach this whole topic anew and say, let's do something totally different.
All right, thank you so much for that. Thank you for your insights there. Jean Redpath joining us via Skype and talking about what's likely to continue to be a very protracted debate in as far as the Constitutional Court judgment is concerned around the use of marijuana for personal use in private space.